Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita with Future Pastimes, and I'm the designer of Firefly Misbehavin, which is a deck building card game set in the Firefly verse. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the supply sets. And the supply sets are cards that you can add to your deck. That's the deck building part of the game. But they're different from the cards that you can get in the market. So I'm going to explain how they're different, how the supply sets work, what all the different effects are for the different supply sets that are in the game. And I'm going to talk about the drafting optional way to set up the game, which can really change things up. So let's start off with what are the supply cards? Well, the supply cards have a little crate icon at the bottom. It matches the icon that's on the supply board itself. In every game, you're going to have the shiny supply set, the black, and then you're going to have 4 more supply sets that fit into categories according to attributes. So you're always going to have a supply set with the deal attribute. In every game, you'll have one that has the fight attribute. You'll have one that is a maneuver, and then you'll have another one that can be any of those. And in some cases, there's a little overlap, which I'll explain here in a minute. One of the things that makes a supply set different from the market is the market, which is composed of cards from the border, the rim, and the core. Those cards, by and large, are all unique. Every card is different in those 3 decks, whereas with the supply set, you're going to be having multiple copies of the same effect. So that's only true on the supply boards. And for the cards that are down here, it's going to be 5. So there's always going to be 5 of whatever this card is, 5 of this, this, and this. With shiny and the black, you have these in every game. And you're always going to have 6 shinies in the game, and you're always going to have 12 the black in every game. It's the other sets that are going to change up. So you might not have the same supply set from one game to the next. Some of the episodes that if you play those, they will dictate which supply sets that you'll use, or they will tell you that you're going to use the player-determined drafting variant that I mentioned earlier. And when you play the game, you can just choose. You can say, hey, why don't we play a game with these supply sets? You can use the ones that are recommended for your first setup or a couple of setups that are in the rule book, or you can draft them, as I'll explain at the end of this video. So let's talk about the different effects. We'll start with the ones that are in the game every time. So you have shiny. Now, the cost of all the cards in influence is going to be the number up here, and influence is underneath the cost. So it's the number on the purple corner of the card. So this one would cost 2 influence to get you. It's basically one of the cheapest cards in the game, only costs 2 influence. And now it can be used for 2 influence on a subsequent turn. If it's in your hand, you can play that to your display area to add 2 influence to your pool, along with any other cards that have 1 or more influence on them. And that's what you use to basically buy cards, or what's called a recruitment action, to add those cards to your deck. But you can use the shiny for other effects as well, and that's what's down here. So you can play it to your display area to just gain 3 credits. You're not using it for its influence at all. You're just saying, you know what? I'm going to do that. I want the credits. And because it doesn't require an activation, you can do that at any time, even on someone else's turn. You can say, oh, you know what? I want those credits. The other thing that you can do is, instead of that, you can say, you know what? I'm going to get 2 credits, and I want to cycle any 2 market cards. And cycling means that you're going to take a face-up card in the market, you're going to shuffle it back into its deck, and then you're going to draw a replenishing card. Could be the same card, but it likely will not be. And because you can do that 2 times, you can do that on 2 different market decks. You could do a core card, and then you could do a border card, or you could do the border card twice, or you could do the border card once and see what you get, and you can say, you know, that's pretty good. Now I'll do a rim deck card and cycle that one as well. So it gives you some flexibility. And in some of the episode cards where you're actually looking to get to specific types of cards in those market decks, like you might need a ship, for example, or a location, the cycling effect of a shiny helps you get to those cards a little more quickly. If you're just waiting until somebody buys a card to replenish that market, you may be waiting a while to get to the stuff that you actually want. So the shiny is a very good utility card. It is cheap, and it has a couple of different uses for you. But one of the main things that distinguishes a supply card from the market card is once you do play that card to your display area, whether it's I'm going to use it for its influence to do a recruitment, or I'm going to use it for its special effect, it is going to return to the supply board. So it does not stay in your deck. That is not true of the cards that you get in the market. Once you get those cards, you add them to your deck, they are pretty much in your deck for the rest of the game. Supply sets, they return to the supply whenever they are used in your display area. Not to be confused with, there are effects that let you discard a card from your hand, and you can discard a supply card for those effects. It does not return to the supply when you're discarding it, only when you're playing it. You're playing it for some reason. And supply cards never get played to your tableau. They can only be played to the display area, which is kind of off the board there. So one of the things that makes Firefly Misbehavin different from a lot of other deck builders is that your deck, you're not really building up a deck that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of a game. It's really going to stay about the same. And in fact, your deck may get smaller because you are getting cards from the supply, which once you use them, they will return. So they're not staying in your deck. And then you're playing cards down to your tableau, which is another important thing. Once it's in your tableau, it's not in your deck. It's still your card. You control it, and it may return to your deck at some point, but not necessarily. So because of that, you are cycling through your deck at a much quicker rate, and you have a lot more agency over which cards you're going to be drawing. So now the other card that you're having in every game is the black, and this is what I call a garbage card. It is not a card that you actually want. It costs 0, but you're never going to buy this card. There's no good reason to have it in the deck. It has no influence. It has no power. It can't be played to your tableau. That means that if it's in your deck at some point, you're going to draw it, and it's a card you can't really use for anything. And the only way to get rid of it, you're going to return it to the supply board when you play a location card. So it's any card that has the little purple planet attribute, or if you trigger one in your tableau. But this card has to be in your hand when you do that. So you have to be like, all right, this is in my hand, and I'm playing a location, and now I can get rid of that card. So it's not a good card to have, but there are a number of effects in the game that will force you or someone else to add the black to your deck. So that's why it's always in the game, because you never know when it's going to show up. So let's talk about the other sets that are not always in every game. You've got a few different things. So we're going to go attribute by attribute. So we're going to start with the deal attribute. So there are 2 different supply cards that have the deal attribute, and that is negotiation and palaver. So we'll start with negotiation. It costs 2, so also one of the cheapest cards to have. It has 1 influence, so you could just use this for 1 influence if you're doing a recruitment action. You're like, all right, this is in my hand. I'm looking at how much other influence I have in my hand or in my tableau that I can use by moving them to the display area. And now, yeah, you can throw this one in there as well. But because it has the deal attribute, you can use this card to make a deal. And in order to make a deal, the first card that you play to your display area must have the deal attribute. Now, everybody's starting deck has at least 1 card that can make deals, but picking up these can make it easier for you to do that. And making a deal, the reason that making a deal is good is because it gives you a chance to potentially get more than 1 card on your turn, because the deal is not a recruitment action, even though it is essentially ending up with you adding another card to your deck. The card doesn't go to your recycle when you get it, when you make a deal. It goes into your hand, which means that if you make a deal for a card that has influence, you could then use that card for a separate, discrete recruitment action, and then you've acquired a second card. The thing about deals, though, is that there are effects that can cancel a deal. So it's a way to basically zap somebody's activation. They've wasted it. They could still do a recruitment if they haven't already done one. So you can use this to make a deal, and you already have 1 influence in your display area once you start making that deal. And deals mean that you can also spend credits as influence when you are trying to get a card, along with any other cards that have influence. And the other cards themselves don't have to have the deal attribute, just your first card. The other thing that you can use a negotiation for, and play it out of your hand, is to cancel a deal. So someone else is making a deal. You can say, all right, I'm playing negotiation, and your deal is canceled. You can also cancel a steal. So there are a couple of actions or effects in the game that are considered steals, and it says steal. So let's say that, Eve's down is trying to steal credits from you. You can play negotiation to cancel that. They cannot steal from you. You can also use it to evade a fight. So if you're in the middle of a fight and it's looking like, oh, it's not going well for me, I'm probably going to lose, and then they're maybe nabbing a good card, you could play this from your hand and you evade the fight. When a fight is evaded, it ends and there's no winner. So the other player doesn't get a reward. But what happens here with the negotiation, when you use it to evade a fight, the opposing player actually does gain a reward. So normally when you evade, there's no reward, but the negotiation is a special case. So they do get a reward as if winning a fight, and then they gain an activation. So they could immediately spend that activation to pick a fight again. So this is a desperate ploy. What you're hoping when you do this to evade a fight is that they have played several cards to their tableau. Once the fight ends, those cards are going to be discarded. They're not in their hand anymore. They don't return to their tableau. They go away, along with any cards that you played. But they could spend verse tokens to retain some of those cards. And because they're getting a reward because you played the negotiation, they can always retain at least one, because they could just get that verse token immediately, spend it to retain one card. But like I said, if they've played 3 cards in that fight to try to win that fight, and they're only able to retain one of them, even with an extra activation, they're probably not going to be able to mount the same kind of offense against you. So it's a little bit desperate, but played well, it can be very effective. So that's negotiation. It has a few different effects. It gives you some options. And that's kind of the key to a lot of what goes on in Firefly Misbehaving, is that you have a lot of options. I like to give players put them in a situation where they have to make a tough decision, because I could do this or I could do that. Which one is the most optimal move? And that's going to change throughout the game. But I like putting players in that position. For me, that's the best part about game design. Here's the other deal card, and that is a palaver. So again, because it has the deal attribute, you can use it to make a deal, and it's going to give you 2 influence. You could just use it for 2 influence without making a deal, so just as part of a normal recruitment action. But the other interesting thing about this is, unlike with negotiation, where it's an either or, you're either using it for this effect down here, or you're using it for influence, or with whether or not you're making a deal. But with palaver, whenever you play it to your display area, you get a credit from the supply. So just by doing this as part of a recruitment, you're getting a credit. But if you're making a deal, you're making the deal, you've got 2 influence as part of that deal, and you're immediately getting a credit, which you could then use as part of that deal. So a palaver, that's why it costs 3 instead of 2, because it could give you 3 influence in a deal. So, and this is for any reason. Any reason you play this to your display area, you're going to pick up a credit. So it's a pretty handy card as well. I do like to get that card in there. It does have 1 power. And, it's never going to go in your tableau. It can't go in there. It doesn't have the shield, so that means it can't be part of your tableau. But there are effects like the Serenity's way to earn verse tokens is by discarding power. So they could discard this 1 power along with another 3 power from 1 or more other cards. That's how they earn a verse token on their turn. So remember, discarding supply cards, they don't return to the supply board. It's only when they're played. All right, next up on the hit parade is we're going to look at the fight cards. And there are essentially 3 cards that have fight. So we're going to start with the big one, and that is Misbehave. It costs 4. That's because when you're using it in a fight, it's bringing 4 power to that fight, and that is a big deal. 4 power in a fight is a lot. So it's a very powerful card. It's a great deterrent. When people see that you have picked up 1 or more Misbehaves, they are not looking forward to picking a fight with you, because they know at some point this is going to be in your hand and you're going to be able to unleash it. But it's got to be in your hand. Otherwise, it's not doing you any good. Like some of the other supply cards, it has alternate effects that you can use instead of using it in a fight. So you could just play it to steal 3 credits. So this is the sort of thing that you might need to use negotiation to cancel a steal. But if somebody's got some credits and you want them, you could play the Misbehave to steal 3 of them. The other thing you can do with Misbehave is you can use it to cancel a deal. So somebody, again, they're playing palaver. They got their 3 influence now. And you're like, no, I don't think so. I'm going to play this out of your hand. But it is kind of, it's painful. It's painful to get rid of a fight card with 4 power, but it may be really important for you to be able to cancel that deal. But curiously, the other thing that you can use this for is to cancel any effect that cancels a deal. So you've played Palaver, you're making a deal. I have played Misbehave to cancel it. You can play your Misbehave to cancel my Misbehave. So that is certainly, it feels a little bit like a Cosmic Encounter, Cosmic Zap, Card Zap thing. And well, you know, Cosmic Encounter is one of the other Fantasy Arts, Future Pastimes games. It's my favorite game, so it certainly has had an influence on me. But I like that back and forth. It feels very Firefly to me. I'm trying to do something, you're shooting at me to stop me from doing it, I'm shooting it back at you. That's almost every episode of Firefly, if you ask me. So that's it. The third card that has the, oh, sorry, no, we're on the second card. So Double Cross is the next one. This is has a fight attribute as well. It only costs 3. It's only going to give you 2 power in a fight. So you can use this in a fight along with, your characters and your items and your whatever else. Just play it in there. That's 2 more power for the offense or for the defense. But it has alternate effects as well. It lets you cancel a deal. It lets you cancel a steal. It lets you cancel attacks. And that's something that the Alliance can do with their verse tokens, is they can tax you. So when they're taking your credits away, it doesn't count as a steal. It counts as a tax. But Double Cross will let you stop that as well. And the other thing that it will cancel is another Double Cross. So if I cancel your deal with a Misbehave, I cannot cancel a Misbehave with a Double Cross. I can only cancel another Double Cross with it. So it's a little more restrictive. But you're not going to have Misbehave and Double Cross in the same game all the time. Only if you have got one of them in this slot and one of them in this slot. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So you can have them in the game. It's just going to depend. They won't always be there at the same time. So that's what the Double Cross. Now we're on to the third one, and that is the Dart. And the Dart is also a maneuver, and it's a maneuver that has a prerequisite. So if you want to play the Dart, you must have a ship in your tableau. So this is a maneuver that is basically when Wash flew Serenity into the Skyplex. That maneuver was called the Dart. So it costs 3. It's got 2 power, and that is 2 power to use in a fight or for any kind of effect where you're discarding power for some reason. Again, like how Serenity can discard 4 power to earn a verse token if they've got a character in play. So you could just play this in a fight if you have a ship. You've got to have a ship in your tableau. The ship itself doesn't have to be doing anything, and the ship can be triggered. Doesn't matter if it's triggered or untriggered. As long as it's in your tableau, you can play the Dart to add 2 to a fight. Now, instead of using it for its power in a fight, the Dart itself has some effects, and I'm going to get to those when I talk about maneuvers, which I'm going to get into next. But you've got 3 different cards with fight attributes, and I should point out that, again, in a game, you could have Misbehave right here as your fight card. You could have Double Cross down here as this is any of these attributes is in there. And then you could have the Dart in there, and you've got a game that has 3 cards in the supply set that can be used in fights. And that is going to be a pretty explosive game. And I'll cover that again more at the end when I talk about the draft. All right, so now we're talking about maneuvers. And the big thing about maneuvers that sets them apart from the other supply cards, in fact, from any other card in the game, is that you can spend your verse tokens to reuse a maneuver before it returns to the supply. So if I've played a card down as a maneuver, I can then spend a verse token to fire off any effect on that maneuver card again. And it's only for effects, and that's an important distinction. So I can't just spend verse tokens to add more power to a fight. That is one limitation of it. It's the effects. Any of these effects can be triggered again. So let's talk about this. We've already talked about just using this in a fight for 2 power. But if you've got a ship in your tableau, you can play the Dart to do a couple of things. One, you could just play it to trigger a card in any player's tableau for no effect. So let's say that they've got Stitch Hessian in their tableau, and that's a guy who can be used in a fight with 3 power. So before you even get the fight going, before you have even spent your activation, you're going to play the dart down into your display area, because playing these cards does not require an activation. No supply card necessarily requires an activation. So you have triggered Stitch Hessian. That means he cannot be moved into a fight. He can't be moved or used for anything. Can't use his special abilities. Can't use him for his power or for his influence or anything. He is basically he's trapped. He's trapped until that player's turn starts, and they will reset. So that's a sneaky way to basically cut off somebody's resources that they're going to be using for something, either a special ability or their attributes. The other thing that you can use the dart for, you play it to your display area to gain an activation. So again, it doesn't cost an activation to use it. You're just playing it in there. You're like, great, I've got an activation. And now I'm going to spend a verse token, and I've got 2 activations, 2 extra activations, because I haven't used any yet. You always get 1 on your turn. And you say, you know what, I'm spending another verse to get another activation. So now you've got 4 activations, and that is how you boom, 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 put down 4 cards in your tableau to reach the game-winning level of power or go well beyond what you needed. And now it doesn't matter if players attack you to try to nab or dispatch any of your cards in your tableau. You have so much power in your tableau that you can't lose. And that's a really powerful way to set yourself up to win the game. The other interesting thing about using those verse tokens is that you don't have to use the same effect. So I played the dart in order to gain an activation. I spent a verse token, and I'm going to use that to trigger a card in your tableau, and I'm going to spend another one to gain another activation. Who knows? You're not limited. You can split those up however you like. So very powerful effects, maneuvers, with a bunch of verse tokens at your disposal. Let's look at a couple more. So full burn is one that costs 4. It's a maneuver that, again, it requires you to have a ship in your tableau in order to play this for anything. It's got 3 power, so that's important for discarding effects. Again, Serenity, they need 4 power to discard it. Niska needs to discard a card with 1 card with exactly 3 power or 3 influence. So this is actually a great card for Niska to get, even if you don't have a ship in your tableau. You won't be able to play this, but you can always discard it to earn a verse. That's how Niska earns a verse. They've got to discard 1 card with 3 power or influence. So very handy for that. Let's talk about the effects. So the full burn, you can use it to draw a card. So you just played the full burn into your display area, whether it's your turn or not. You're drawing a card, and then you discard a card from your hand. So you're basically optimizing what's in your hand. You might be like, oh, I've got the black in my hand. I won't be able to use that. So I'm going to play my full burn in order to draw a card. I'll get rid of the black or get rid of something that you're not going to need. A lot of times you're using this while you're in a fight because you're hoping to draw a card that has the fight attribute. After you do that, so if you play the card, you get to draw a card, you discard a card, and then you're going to choose. You're either going to force a player to add the black to their recycle pile, which means now it's in their deck, or you can draw 1 additional card. And like I said, when you're spending the verse tokens to fire this effect, you can change up how you do it. So the first time you play it, you might say, all right, I'm going to draw a card, discard a card, then I'm going to draw another card. Now I'm going to spend a verse token. Again, I draw a card and discard a card, and now I'm going to force you to add the black to your deck. And then I'm going to spend another verse token to draw a card and discard, and then maybe I'll draw 1 more card. So you've got a lot of flexibility. That's why those verse tokens are critical. You have to get them. They are so useful in a lot of different ways, and we're just talking about maneuvers. So yes, full burn, very powerful card. The last maneuver we have is Crazy Ivan. And again, it has the ship attribute. It costs 3 power. Again, it's useful card for Niska, good for Serenity as well. And the effects here, it would let you reset a card. So there's a couple of reasons you might want to do that. If you have triggered a card for an effect, and you want to be able to draw a full hand at the end of your turn, you might play the Crazy Ivan to reset that card that you played. You might trigger a card for effect and then want it for its influence when you do your recruitment. And this would let you do that because it doesn't have any influence. So you might say, yeah, I'm triggering Mal for some effect, and he has 2 influence, so I'm going to reset him so that I can use him for something. Or again, if you're in the middle of a fight and one of your cards, you know, Stitch Hessian, was triggered by somebody else using full burn, not full burn, one of the other cards that we talked about earlier. But you're like, I'm going to reset him so that he can now enter into that fight. So very handy to have those as long as you have the ship. And I said that was the last maneuver. It's actually the last maneuver that has that ship prerequisite, because there's one more maneuver, and that is Fai Wu. And Fai Wu, it's a maneuver. It does not have the prerequisite, so you can play it any time that you would like. And because it's a maneuver, again, you can use it multiple times with spending of the verse token. So what does the Fai Wu do? It's got no influence and no power, so you're only using it for its effect. That's why it only costs 2. But it lets you discard a card to gain an activation or draw a card. Now, when you're discarding a card, it's either from your hand or it's one of the cards in your tableau. And again, if you're discarding it, it could be a card that you triggered in your tableau. It does not specify. Some cards will say discard an untriggered card or discard a card from your hand. But since Fai Wu doesn't specify, it can be from anywhere. Any one of your cards, you can discard it. And that lets you either gain an activation or draw a card. And again, that can be useful for playing a lot of cards on your turn. If you've got those extra activations, it costs an activation to play a card down into your tableau, and having cards in your tableau is one of the ways that you win the game. So Fai Wu with a lot of verse tokens, boom, boom, boom. The other thing that you can do, though, after you do that, so your first thing is first, you're discarding a card, and then you're either gaining an activation or drawing a card, and then you may remove a card that's in your hand or your tableau from the game, and that includes the black. So you can, if you've picked up some cards in the early part of the game that maybe they have a lot of influence, but they don't have a lot of power, or they can't be used in a fight, they've done their job. They've helped you to grow your deck and to get the cards that you need to win, like maybe some planet cards that have a lot of power and great defense, so they're hard to steal. But now you want to optimize your deck so that you can get rid of the stuff that you don't really need anymore. Fai Wu is how you do it. It's the only card in the game that basically lets you trash cards, get them out of the game. So that is what that is for. So those are your different supply sets. Like I said, a lot of the games, you will have a predetermined set. Your basic game is you're going to be having, Misbehave, and you're going to have Palaver, and you're going to have Full Burn, and you're going to have Crazy Ivan. That's your standard game. First time you play it, those are the ones that you should use. But when you're ready to take it up a level, and the way that I prefer to play it is that you do a draft. So you're going to pick a first player, and it's usually, again, it's whoever last misbehaved. That's your first player. You're always going to put in shiny in the black, but then you're going to draft. So you're going to look at all of the supply sets, and you're going to decide which one that you want to add into the game. So if you are somebody who is afraid of people having a lot of misbehaves in the game, you might say, you know what, I'm going to draft Double Cross. I'm going to put it right there in the fight slot so that it's going to take the temperature down a little bit if there are fights. Now, the next player, and this is going to be in counterclockwise order, they're going to be drafting something else for one of these other supply sets. And then that's what you have to worry about, because they could draft Misbehave down here. This slot is for any attribute. It doesn't mean they have to have all 3. It just needs to have one of them. And they're all going to have at least one of them. But they might say, you know what, I would like to have the dart. I want to have a maneuver down there, so they could put that. Or they might be interested in, being able to get extra activations, draw cards, and cheaply, so they put that down there. You're not really sure because there's no prescribed order. You can draft whatever you want. Now, you could say, I'm going to draft, the first thing I'm going to draft is negotiation, and I'm going to put it right there. So now we're stuck. We have to have a fight, a deal, and a maneuver. And we're only going to have one maneuver in this game because, well, actually, that's not true. You could have 2 maneuvers. Because again, if you draft the dart up here, but you are only going to have one Well, yeah, again, you could have the dart because it works both ways. So I was going to say one thing, but it wasn't necessarily true. So you're going to definitely have two deals. So if you got negotiation down there, you're going to have palaver up there. And that's going to be a very different game. It's going to be a lot of dealing. You could have a situation where you have not much fight, a lot of maneuvers, a lot of fight. It really changes up the game a lot. And depending on which faction that you're playing, that could be a big deal. The Niska faction is a faction that likes to fight. They have the most fight in their starting deck, and they're incentivized to get more fight because everybody is. So you might be like, yeah, I want to have a lot of fight in there because I'm going to be doing it. Or you might say, you know what, I don't want to have a lot of fight in this game because that gives me a little bit of an edge over the other players. It just depends on your play style. So this does allow for a lot of modulation in those terms. So that's it. That's it for supply sets. We got a lot of ideas. If we ever do an expansion, which I've already designed, it's got a lot of interesting stuff in there. We are looking for play testers, so reach out if you are interested in play testing a potential expansion for Firefly. If you've got questions about Firefly or the supply set, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer those. And you can ask them here on YouTube. You can ask us in the Discord. The channel is, it's not hard to find. Future Pastimes. And we've got a link on the About description for this YouTube. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you see you again soon.